We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leah Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host Leah Mattinson, and thank you so much for wherever it is you are on this beautiful planet tuning into the Master Your Life podcast. I'm joined today by Dr. David Hardy. Dr. Dave is a functional neurologist out of the Red Deer Sport Collegiate Center. He's also a mastermind host, and he is a podcast host, and he also is a teacher and educator. So Dr. Dave Hardy, if you want to get a hold of him, you can check out his work at thehardybrain.ca. Little pregnant pause there, .ca. So make sure that if you want to check out of any Dr. Dave's work, that you look for thehardybrain.ca.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So today, Dr. Dave and I are going to pick up on our conversation from our last episode where we were talking about the developmental milestones from conception to age 4. But we thought we'd go back a little bit and actually dive into age 3, because that is a critical age, isn't it, Dr. Hardy?
That is a very important age because basically what happens is we have another shift in how the brain develops at that age.
Yeah. And so what's the shift that happens then? I'm surrounded by grandchildren, so I am very curious and want to know this. And also want to encourage everybody to get out a pen and paper, as I always do, to get your notes down, because if you have friends with 3-year-olds, and, a lot of people complain about the 2-year-olds being, the tantrum and the terrible 2s, but I can tell you that I've seen some the terrible 3s also.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and a lot of people are saying that there's kind of been that shift too, that terrible 2s are happening later and later. And this kind of, once again, is a warning sign that our kids' brains are not developing properly. Right. And we can continue to kind of normalize pathology in brain development, but it's not helping society by doing that.
So what is going on? What is going on?
Yeah.
Poor little brains. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah. And the thing is, we're noticing these shifts, which in the general public, which means the research and healthcare community has not gotten that information out as well as it probably could have, and sooner. And what happens kind of at the first stage of development is you have more development and maturation of the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is so important because it's more about body awareness and sensory input. And that kind of sets us up for what's going to happen with our emotions later in life as well. So that body awareness is so key to confidence versus having anxiety about yourself. And we're really seeing that later and later, is that there's so many kids with anxiety or depression, and they shouldn't have it. They should be full of life and enjoyment and being able to play, but we're not seeing that. And we're seeing more and more cases of anxiety and depression in children, and then later into adulthood as well. And a big part of that is that the right hemisphere is just not developing properly because of everything that's kind of bombarding it. And then also the pressures we put on children without even knowing it to become these geniuses earlier and earlier, which
and we're not. Well. And so those of you who are actually tuned into the audio version of this podcast, I'd like to encourage you to come over to the website, masteryourlife.ca, so you can watch the video version. And then I want to play a little game. with you all on the video because this body awareness thing is very key. And we have such low body awareness ourselves, Dr. Hardy, that it is.
Yes.
So even when we say right hemisphere, in my head, I'm going right hemisphere. Now, is that on the right-hand side? If I put my hand on my head, or is it the opposite of what I think? So let's just start out with kind of the basic, anatomy stuff. Like other adults, do you know where your right hemisphere is? Or would you go, I wonder if I'm right hemisphere or left hemisphere dominant? Like, what do you even know about your own brain? And yet we're supposed to be assessing the brains of these little cutie pies that are running around.
Right,
so
absolutely.
Dr. Dave, give us some orientation.
If we were to divide the brain basically straight from the nose all the way up the forehead, back the skull, and down the neck, that would kind of be the lines separating the left side of the brain to the right side of the brain. And basically, for the anatomy side, it's kind of cool to know that. But basically, all we need to know is that one side's not developing properly. And that side's responsible for how we feel about ourselves and basically processing most of the sensory information coming in. And the other really important key function of this part of the brain, this hemisphere, this side of it, is that it develops what's called this hyperloop. And you don't really need to dive too much into the anatomy with it. But this hyperloop basically is to fire down and really key in our attention as well. There's this other kind of, multiple centers of the brain called the basal ganglia. And why that's so important is that's the dopaminergic side. Mm-hmm. And it has three pathways, one that deals with emotions, the mesolimbic. It's got one that deals with movements, the nigrostriatal. And then it's got the thinking side of it as well, the mesocortical. And those three kind of outputs of the basal ganglia are go or don't go. Do it, don't do it. Move, don't move. And this kind of on-off switch is just so important. It's like, okay, I've got this thought and I'm just going to blurt it out. And then we get that impulsivity. And then we got these kids that can't sit still. They're always constantly moving. So this loop, this kind of the brakes of the system are more associated with the right side of the brain. And you think about it, when you're kind of taking in information, it's all sensory stuff coming in, and that's right side of the brain. So attention is taking in information so that we can later make a decision. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. I'm not going to do that. And it's really kind of that simple when we boil it down to these functions. Is it's taking information and apply it to basically how our own body feels. How about us as a person? What do we need to do with all this information coming out to react to it? So it makes sense that this is kind of the first side that develops, is you need to take in information before you make a decision. And if you jump straight to the decision, that impulsivity develops, and we have all these learning disabilities and ADHD tendencies and everything else. So really what's kind of happening that's causing that side of the brain not to develop is a lack of stimulation. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, things that are going to decrease how cells work. So when we look at how cells work, okay, whether it's a neuron, whether it's another cell in the body, we need fuel and we need stimulation. And what we don't need is inflammation. And inflammation or toxins or anything else that is going to be detrimental to cells and how cells function. We've got this developing brain, and the toxic load is just dumped on basically when the child is in the mother's belly. And then, of course, we dump on stress chemicals as well. And we went through that with the last podcast. So if you didn't hear it, we go into a lot of detail about kind of what's going on in those crucial development time, basically right from conception up until this 3-year-old mark. And at this 3-year-old mark is kind of where there's a shift in the sides of the brain that develop. And of course, it's not directly at this time period. It's kind of a gradual, but you think about it, it's 1 or 2 years of this shift that's occurring. And that, of course, is when the child starts to act and do things more so than take in things. Right. And then you get of course, the terrible 2s, terrible 3s, and hopefully not the terrible 4s, but we don't know.
Sometimes they go on and on. So here's
Absolutely.
a little tool and a tool and a tip. So again, if you haven't tuned into the video version, I want to encourage you again to do that. So you can see, and people go, well, what do you do with the paper and pen? Well, lots of people like to make lists. So I just wrote down a little bit of what you said there. And what I would do is write fuel and stimulation on one side of my page, and then inflammation on the other side of the page, and start writing notes about what is what, like what's causing the feel good stuff. So the fuel and the stimulation, and what is causing inflammation. Because sometimes when you're a busy parent or grandparent, you don't even actually know. Like it's really unconscious, right? You just go, oh, well, I got through the day. Everyone's lived. Yay. So, and we are living busier and busier lives, and,
that's for sure.
And also where lots of indoctrination is not leading you to the path of these fuel and stimulation stuff. But inflammation ends up because we're living a life where we're trying to shortcut things all the time, right? It's like the less effort, the less, and again, it's supported heavily by society. Yeah, you don't need to do that. Don't worry about that. The TV will take care of that, or whoever, other stuff will take care of that. When, we know that that's not true. And so so again,
and so
as a
much
parent,
of it is trying to develop comfort. And quite commonly, and this is one of those leadership things, is that development never comes from comfort.
Right.
That
sorry, guys. Oh, no. Everyone shut off the podcast.
Right? Drop the mic. Yeah.
What? I can't listen to this.
That's kind of the key phrases for a lot of the big seminars with the good big gurus about leadership, is that, the uncomfort is what actually shifts things. And that's kind of more the adult realm, but also in development, that's kind of what we see as well, is that it can't always be comfort. There's some situations that is a healthy stress that develops other systems. And one of those is, of course, we talked about diapers and everything in the last podcast about basically when a child's learning to develop that control of the bladder, and when they go pee and when they don't, is kind of that discomfort of being set down and not feeling that they're that in
it's
a comfortable
yucky.
situation.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. A little disgust, showing a little disgust is okay.
Exactly.
The kids need cues. And parents need to give them cues. I think a lot of people in society really don't either get cues from it's like this, everything is okay. It's like, no, actually not everything is okay. And so we need to start cueing each other about, that's actually not okay. I don't like it when you do that thing, because that's how we can then respond. But if we just kind of go, oh, that's okay. Like people will do anything because they think that it's okay with you. Right. So, it starts very little. Starts really super little, and it's informed consent. It's early iterations of informed consent.
Right. And we're not talking about basically puberty and when sexual functions start to develop. No. We're talking about that innocent age where
that's right.
Where basically that child needs to know its own body, and that includes all of its body, and develop that input, and then the brain develops and grows as well. And that leads to so many functions down the line that then we just sit around and talk about.
Let's talk about what the things are that would have hijacked that in the last few years. Like at that age, the 3-year-olds, what would have interfered with that learning? Besides diapers, we talked about that in the last episode, but diapers and what else?
Yeah, if we look at what's going to decrease cell function and how they develop, so kind of a lack of the healthy nutrients that are going to help support good developing cells and tissues. And yeah, our food supply is full of processed foods, and we're seeing that more and more in baby foods as well. And so there is that aspect of things where we don't have the proper fats, we maybe don't have the proper proteins, and then we bombard them with way too many sugars and carbs. And those are just the macronutrients. We're not even talking about all the micronutrients that help develop and support cells and metabolic activities in the body. And so we're seeing kind of a poor food supply that way. And that can also come through the mother right from breastfeeding, right? Is what's the mother's diet like that's going to support good, nutritious breast milk? And then on top of that, now we've also got stress chemistry. So basically when in utero, when the baby's in the womb, it's exposed to a lot of the same chemicals as the mother, or at least a lot of the same frequencies and energy that the mother is going through. So if there's more stress, then we're starting to pass that on to the child. And that's not a good thing either. Because that stress chemistry or abundance of high frequency energy instead of kind of that slower, relaxed, healing type energy is not good for a developing fetus. And then we go into toxins, and we're exposed to so many more environmental toxins just because they're so much more abundant out there. And then too, there can be pathology, pathogens. So viruses, molds, bacteria, all of that can be harmful to developing child. And some of it's good, some of it's going to develop its immune system, but it also kind of depends on which ones. And then too, whether there's an imbalance in the immune system, both mother and child, as that child's developing. So we've got all of those factors on top of everything else. And that's just before it comes into the world or its early infancies. And then the stimulations are different. And we're really kind of skipping that step of touch and holding the child more and more. That skin to skin contact is less. And that's detrimental to basically how the baby starts to develop that first sense of feel.
You know what? I love this example because really recently somebody said to me, because the moms are taking either having home births or they're taking the children, like moms and dads are taking the kids home really early out of the hospital. And in the good old days, quote unquote, like I remember I was in for 3 days, at least with one and 5 with the other, the oldest one, 5 days. Yeah. There was a little bit of maybe slight complications there. So I got to stay a little longer and then 3 days with the second one. But what that set up was that people would come to visit me in the hospital. And so I didn't have to do my hair and makeup. I didn't have to clean my house. I didn't have, people showing up with casserole to say, congratulations on the new baby on the first day that I was home. So you could actually be more the skin to skin contact because there wasn't that kind of invasion of your home. And so it is a complication where you're going home, first day often, not even an overnight for a lot of people. And then of course your well-meaning friends and family who want to see this newborn little sweetie pie because they are just so precious, right? And they also want you to feel supported, right? They do. They want, if we don't show up, then maybe they won't feel supported. But meanwhile, sometimes the mom and dad feel like they can't be closed off at all to have that skin to skin contact because they have to cover up because the mom and dad are coming over. or mom, their grandma's coming over. And so that really kind of set me back a little, Dr. Hardy, because I thought, I'm that grandma. I'm the grandma who'd be going, well, no, I want to be there to help. Like, I want to be there to bring stuff. Right. And then my kids are going, no, like helping would actually be just stay home for a couple of days or pop in, but have no expectation that anything's going to be done here. It's going to be chaos in a zone. So I'm like, but thank you so much for telling me that, because I assumed that I'm helping, right, by going over, but really that's not necessarily that helpful. But it's like figuring it out in your own family. But if the skin-to-skin contact stuff is important,
big time.
Knowing that as a support person, or knowing that as a spouse, and encouraging your wife to actually take that time, or you and your wife to take that time, or partner together, in a loving way and nurturing way to really savor that time. And that can be tough too if you've got other kids in the house, other children, right? Because then you're trying to manage all that energy too. So we feel you. Really, I feel you. That's right. And try to get some help or support in place, maybe to, just help with the older children if there are older children during that really precious and important time. And other people maybe won't understand why you're asking for that. So it's important to explain it. Right. Explain why it is that it's so important.
And so much of this has to be planned earlier because, of course, during the moment, you're not gonna be thinking in that way. Mm-hmm. So, this is all academic unless it's applied. And I think what you're saying is really important, just to start thinking about this as those family units and dynamics. Even before the birth happens, and then the child's really set up for a better life. Yeah,
and you're set up as a parent for a better life also, because your child is more well functioning.
Oh yeah, let's go back to that 3-year-old who's throwing more and more tantrums. And
yes, let's.
And like, if you don't have the maturation of this right brain, then basically more tantrums are going to happen, because that feeling of oneself is diminished. And then also that loop that is responsible for focus isn't there. So now you've got a child that doesn't feel things as well, or is maybe more irritable because they don't recognize their own body, and they've got more impulsivity. And right there, if you just do the math, 1 + 1 equals, in this case, a horrible amount of tantrums and everything else. And it's going to continue. And then it's going to develop into learning challenges. When the child goes to school, it's going to develop into behavioral issues as well, because it can't self-regulate as well. And it all kind of happens in these earlier stages. And then when we were trying to make a change later, we go more into the talk and that side of things, when it's a body physical issue in many cases. And that's the phases that were missed. And it's just kind of maddening, this process we're in with children and the development and how brains actually function and work. So, yeah.
And so why is it maddening? Because that's
because we're doing the wrong things, and it just turns into, normalizing something that's not normal. And then trying to find ways to compensate for an issue that we could probably dealt with better. Right. And why compensate for something that you can actually make changes with? And it's the support and everything is very important, but actually having the right action is, in my opinion, way more important.
Right. And, so having the right expectations, number one, is important. So the expectation that your children are going to have milestones, and that there's going to be these challenges, and that the time that they shouldn't be moved to the right on the time chart. because we haven't gotten actually stupider. We're supposed to have evolved. So if you're looking at yourself as a self-regulating human being who considers that you would be, advancing in your intelligence and that your children would be, the product of that, then you would be going, okay, well, how do I actually advance this child? Not how do I make them slower and go along with now everything's at 3, 4, 5. Like you need to actually, first of all, have the awareness that the achievement, and you might find that your friends and family don't necessarily support you. I don't really know why, because financially to deal with things after the fact, like just do some math, guys, get out your calculator and figure out like a box of diapers for however long they last for, size whatever it is, 5, 6, like how long do they last for, and how times that by a year. Because when you do from age 2 to age 3, you're paying out all of that. So even if your only motivation is financial, it's probably I'm going to say a couple $1,000 at least, because diapers are expensive. So and then all of you who virtual signaling environmental people, it's like, don't have your kids in diapers after 2 years old, and that's part of that. You're not helping the environment at all. So it's just going, am I actually living in alignment with what I said was important to me? We've all done it, guys. We've all done it. So I'm just
Who wants to be changing diapers for an extra year?
Right. I don't want to. Wet wipes, diapers, like all of it. And and it is tough going. It is tough going again, because we live busy lives. But if you really focus down in on these things and get some help from people who know what they're doing, that's another thing I think that's been lost in this whole culture of people moving away from one another or not being able to spend time together, is you don't have the wisdom of the elders or the older people in your family to go, well, that's completely awesome that you're doing that. Let's get that potty chart out and let's get the stickers and showing up with presents.
Even as we're going through like all this information, like so much of it seems to be thrown right at the mother. Of course, that's so tough with mothers, because they're doing so much. And it really is looking for those supports around as well, and for them to be on the same page with all of this. And that's so key with all of this, is you can't put it on one person. And the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, is so true.
Yes.
And, I'd say it's even harder though before it's a child, and when it's a toddler and a baby. That is just so critical that there's other supports around the mother that have this information as well.
Yes. And that dads do work.
Dads do as well. Absolutely.
And they work, right? So it's like, that's also warped expectation. I think it's a bit warped that the dad can do everything as a silo too. It's, so no, when we're talking other supports, it's like your family, your friends, your, the other people in the community, maybe people you go for coffee with as a mom's group or whatever, that everyone's kind of supporting and helping each other, or play groups, where you're supporting and helping each other. So some of the kids can run around while you're, parenting, helping each other to figure those things out. Banding together a little bit. And that's been very difficult, because over the past couple of years or few years, I think a lot of people have been led to believe that they should be freaked out by other human beings. It's like, and lots of this whole COVID baby thing is no joke. It isn't, so you guys are up against it with little ones, that because you need to realize that the foe is a lot different than it was prior to 2020. Because you've got kids that are not developing as quickly, lots of kids entering school really struggling, horribly struggling. And so again, it's the people who listen to this podcast. You know who you are. You're listening because you're going, man, I really don't want that life experience. I want to master this area of my life. And it is hard. It is hard.
And that kind of sends us into this next phase, that transition too of the right hemisphere coming over to the left hemisphere. Now, think about it when children start to kind of play with each other. So this was kind of the key that just triggered me when you were talking there about the play and everything, is that, yeah, they start to socialize, but they're still taking in all this information about other people now, other little ones as well. And it's right in that area, that time frame where the shift is happening, that this occurs. And if you take that away, once again, you're going to take away part of that initial development at a crucial stage. And remember that all these stages, even though they may kind of be at a little bit of a different time frame for each child, is something that is meant to happen in the development. And there's kind of crucial time frames for them as well. And if you start taking away those facial expressions when that sensory information about other people, other children is coming in, or supposed to, then once again, that's going to really hold that child back. And we're going to see it later in life when we start to get more of the mental health problems, because we didn't have the right development to set children up for the success later. And that's such a crucial area too, is that period when they first start to play and interact with other children. And if you take that away, it's not going to be good, and it's going to be difficult to get back.
Yeah, and I think mental health issues are starting younger and younger. So we've got hordes of kids who are being labeled with ADD, ADHD, and all other kinds of mental health things, like some of them prior to school age. Like, that is, to me, absolutely incredible. It's an incredible devolution of our human species. So just knowing that that's not normal, I think that's the first thing. Like, set your expectations to the standard that should be normalized, not what is being normalized.
Exactly.
And why would anyone want to do this besides saving money and a couple bucks? And why would anyone want to do this? Why would anyone uptake
so much
raising great kids
later on?
Right.
And let's talk about later on, though. We still have this child that's developing. Yeah, we've really honed in on this crucial phase where the hemispheres kind of take different functions. So now the left brain comes online more, and the left brain is more action, more go do things, more intellectual. And then, of course, that's what we really start to hammer away. Yeah. And we got to get that intellectual side firing. And that's what school's about. And we got to start them earlier learning stuff. And well, no, the first step is body and self. And then that slow integration into the outside world and doing things. But also so much of the other parts of the nervous system are coming online as well. Right. So basically, different parts of the nervous system happen at different stages. And yeah, we call it, of course, toilet training. Then later on, we kind of call it puberty eventually, and then adulthood, and then degeneration. And Freud, of course, had these stages: the oral stage, anal stage, phallic stage, latency, genital stage. So he was only talking about basically one part of the nervous system that comes online. So different stages, of course. Sensory input starts first with the cheek and suckling. And then, of course, getting rid of that, then going to the bathroom. And then there's kind of a period where that should be working. And it should be working when the child sleeps as well. So not the bedwetting later in life and in that childhood. And then, of course, we hit puberty. So this part of the nervous system, just with these functions, of course, have different stages. And that happens in different developmental times. Now, of course, the nervous system's developing in these different stages, but it's also getting bombarded by all this social and intellectual information we take in. And maybe call it the nurture versus nature. But you have the hardware, if we wanted to use the computer analogy, the hardware developing and improving as the child ages. And then, of course, we have all the different software programs, all the pressures from society and everything else that we toss on top of that. So quite commonly, what's happening now and what can happen in abuse cases and everything else is that, in those horrible cases, is that software programs are being integrated at stages where that hardware, the nervous system development, isn't appropriate for it. And that becomes a huge major issue. And of course, that's when things really go haywire is, yeah, you've got a nervous system that's not equipped to handle the software and everything that's being thrown at it. Mm-hmm. And so that really becomes that social debate of what we expose our children to and at what ages as mm-hmm. well. And of course, that goes far beyond just Freud's kind of genital different phases and everything else. That goes for the entire nervous system, though. Mm-hmm. That goes from basically that age of play, like we talked about, and what sort of intellectual things should children be thinking about at that age type thing, and what should they be exposed to, and the stories and the books that movies, videos, and of course, just the talk that they hear from adults. Mm-hmm. And that goes from everything from political issues to basically curriculum development in schools and all of that. And it really does need to be age appropriate, but we also need to look at nervous system development for that age appropriateness.
Right. And so where does the idea of appropriateness come from?
Yeah, I would say it's basically how the nervous system's developing, how that hardware is developing before we start dumping on the software, the issues and the stress that of course our overthinking as humans have. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of becomes then the key part of that. And
I think one of the big abuses that we've done to our kids is to accept that the dissolution of the family is a good idea.
Agreed.
In these critical ages. And so,
and I'd put not just the family, but the whole community around that. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to one individual who moved back from Europe to North America, and basically he was going on and saying that, as children get older in Europe, basically they're giving more and more little responsibilities, mm-hmm. and that kind of the adults around would be able to kind of talk to the kids and tell them not to do things and everything else. But they were kind of set free more. And then versus, okay, we're back in North America, we've got to drive now, versus the kids just going off walking to wherever they're supposed to go. Right. And it's all up to the family to do it. Mm-hmm. That if you had told your 8-year-old to walk home, it's like the school system's like, no way, that's dangerous type thing. And we've lost that community and those interactions around it as well, mm-hmm. that kind of give direction, but not hard structure to children's lives. They're allowed to explore, mm-hmm. versus not being allowed to explore.
Yeah. And for legitimate reasons sometimes, because there is dangerous people in the community. So it's a very, this accepting criminality is a whole nother, issue, but it comes back to the 3-year-old, because the reason for having criminals in the first place, or one of them, is because we didn't take care of things when the child was 3. Yeah. So the number of people who are in jail, mm-hmm. males who are in jail, is exponentially higher because of physical violence, because that age and stage of development wasn't handled properly.
Yes.
So that impulse control. Mm-hmm. And I know people are going, well, that's a big leap, Leah. Nope. No. That's right.
Yeah. And if we look at like one of the big stats, it's going to be around fetal alcohol syndrome.
Okay, yes, let's talk about that.
And that's going to be a key one with criminality, because now you've got a bombardment of a toxic substance that decreases how the brain and nervous system develops. And that's just kind of one of those hardcore diagnosed conditions that you can measure in the criminal population. And it's estimated to be extremely, extremely high.
So I was shocked when you'd said, and I was shocked a bit because FAS wasn't around very much when I was doing my counseling, because that was 1991, so that was really not studied very much. So I was shocked when you talked during an interview about that actually happens before the woman even know she's pregnant.
Right.
So if you have the lifestyle of drinking, even so have studies shown how much you need to drink? Is it one drink during conception that things happen?
No one really knows. But
okay.
Basically, the more drinks, the more likelihood some damage is going to happen, type thing. And it's a combination of factors now too. There's other things that are going to deteriorate how the brain and nervous system and cells develop.
Right. Yes.
We're seeing it. And of course, there's other conditions or things that aren't quite diagnosed. It's more in the gray areas that once again set people up for success or failure later in life. And we get into that debate of whether it's free will, it was a choice decision, versus whether it was something neurologic. And it's both. It's a combination. And obviously you want to skew it to be that it was a choice that people don't make because they've got a healthy functioning brain, nervous system that can think and make proper decisions. Do this impulse or don't do this impulse. And, oh no, there's more drives. I don't feel my right brain better, my own body. So self-stimulation and everything in that realm, and these huge impulses and drives that happen before the cognitive thinking and impulse control happens. And it's a combination of both of those factors that are leading to a lot of the problems that we were seeing in society. And then of course we top off with more fear, more stress, and everything else that just perpetuates that cycle and makes it worse.
Yeah, and that's an honest statement, because it isn't getting less fearful and less anxiety currently in our culture or in our families. Maybe the families. Let's fingers crossed that the families are starting to have more value over keeping the family together. Let's talk a little bit about how to heal this, how to fix it, how to heal it, how to get ahead of it, for lack of a better term, how to get ahead of it. So that if you know that you're a parent or a grandparent with a child that's struggling, because the first fix is with yourself and in your home, right? Because I think, again, it's like the finger pointing that everything is external to me and my family. Like my family's good. We're good. Everything's fine here. But that, for the people who are, again, listening to this show, that's not, they're going, I want to master this. And I see we've got things going on. And maybe even you have looked back at your own life and gone, you know what, I've got some neurological things going on that are not serving me very well, like impulse control problems. And I don't want to be one of the sheeple. I don't want to be one of the masses that just keeps going down the same road for myself as an adult. And then how do I actually help my children to be able to be on track as much as possible? And how do I support if there's problems going on? So can you speak into that a bit, Dr. Hardy? It depends on basically what level of dysfunction there is. And a lot of people don't know it. They just know that something's not right. And the first is, let's look at the basics, fuel and stimulation. So are you getting the proper fuel in there? So oxygen, glucose, sometimes ketone bodies, nutrients on top of that, of course.
are you eating real food?
Right.
And that's such a key factor, is that fuel nutrition side of things, of course.
Yeah. And same.
How to
And so that
develop
is
the
really,
cells.
yeah, that's really important, because nutrition, lots of
Mm,
people drink everything. So
yes.
they don't chew anything. Like there's no heart, like, I just slammed my Profi, which is terrible, or my protein infused, da, da, da. Like they're not chewing anything and they're not cooking anything. So they bypass their whole way that our body is designed. And it does cause an effect that isn't that.
Oh yeah. Like you
Awesome.
hear about the juicing. Juicing's a horrible idea because you take all the fiber out of it and then you just bombard the system with sugar. So don't do that. Yeah, you get a whole bunch of good nutrients with it, but no, it's not good to have it thrown into the system all at once. And then if there isn't that fiber and the things that actually bind food together, when we're talking bind things together, we're talking actually nature's way of doing it.
Right.
And that helps the gut biome. And then you have the proper microorganisms that actually digest our food in the gut, and a healthier microbiome. And that's so key right away too. And of course, it may be needed, it may not be, but like different times when we use antibiotics can wipe out some of that as well. And we need to reforest the biome properly. So all of this sets us up for better nutrition and better nutrients that actually go into cells and help us out. Not just that though, if it goes the wrong direction, then there's all sorts of neurons and receptors that send messages up to our brain through our gut. And this is one of those body awareness things, is that our body is constantly sending messages up to our brain that then get interpreted in how we feel. And we might not be aware that basically our gut is putrefied and sending all these horrible signals up to our brain. And that's one of the reasons we feel irritable and just don't feel good. We feel yucky about ourselves. So it's this combination of both. We can't separate them. We do in textbooks and to make things easier. All of it, though, is sending a signal to the brain that is interpreted, and then that turns into a feeling and sensation that we have. And that turns into long-term behaviors. And if we're constantly feeling a certain way, we're going to behave a certain way as well. Now we need to look at stimulation. Are we actually stimulating the parts of our body that give us different states? So that more relaxed, calm state is associated more with one's that touch, that feel, that balance, that movement that we have. That's right into that serotonergic system more so. And our acetylcholine, which goes up into thinking. So all of these movements and body sensation, proprioception is not even included in the five senses. And it's the biggest one.
Which might be a mind blower for a lot of people, right?
To the brain. What's that?
I said that's a mind blower for a lot of people because they think we really do only have the five senses, but there's a lot more going on.
Tons more.
Yes, tons more.
Then there's vision is very much alertness. There's a reason why when we're sleeping and in a calm state, we have our eyes closed. Vision and light is alertness. And so much of what we do is vision dominant. And then we ramp up that alertness centers. And if these are firing too much when we're meant to be in a calm state and ready to sleep, then we're not able to sleep. And we're seeing that being a huge issue.
Yes.
Massive issue with people.
Massive issue.
Is I'm tired during the day, but then I'm too alert when I try to go to sleep. So we're not able to even change states in our body for some reason. And that's because we've been firing the wrong ones way too much, and not firing the ones that soothe us and calm us, relax us, and lets our body recover, heal for the next day, and so that we can perform at that alert level. Right. And this goes all the way from childhood up into adults and even in seniors in that degeneration phase of our life as well.
Yeah. I want to take just a minute to talk about one of the therapies that I've came upon recently that I've been raving about because it is so effective in this body awareness and calming the nervous system down. And I talk about Qigong all the time because it works, but a lot of people don't like to do Qigong because it looks silly. And they don't even know what it is. So they can find out, you can find out more about Qigong by coming to the masteryourlife.ca website. But if you've tuned into the video version of this podcast, you'll see behind me that I have these they're called IteraCare therapy devices, and they are terahertz frequencies to help people to feel better. They're therapy devices. So they tune up your frequency, and my grandkids love them. But, so it's like that whole, you can blow this nice gentle air. It's like either can be gentle, warm, or cool. So it's hot or cold therapy, and you don't need to have a doctorate to be able to run it. But that said, it's always good to have adjunct therapies, right? So if you're seeing somebody who is a professional like yourself in functional neurology or a chiropractic way, your chiropractor might suggest that you get something like you might get a treatment in a chiropractic office with the pro of these IteraCare devices. And then they might suggest that you take home for your home therapy between uses, like a classic model, so that you can keep up your treatments and that you can start to actually feel really excellent in your own home. And so what do you think about adjunct therapies like that, Dr. Hardy? Do you think that they're effective?
It's key.
Or can be? Key.
It's absolutely key. The common complaint is, once I see a chiropractor, I always need to go to a chiropractor.
Yes.
Once I exercise, I always need to exercise.
That pesky exercise.
Right.
Eating is like that too.
Same things here. We're stimulating nerves and receptors that help the nervous system. Yes. And if you don't want something to constantly have to go to, then you need to be doing some of it on your own as well. That's right. And you can't just sit there and say, okay, well, I'm just going to wait till the next big thing happens that kicks my health. And that doesn't work in this model of actually performing and maintaining this huge gift you have, which is yourself. Yes. And if you're not taking care of it, it's going to eventually break down, and it's not going to be good for you. And then you're going to be sitting around, well, how did that happen? And a lot of it is that we're not looking at the basics, which is just that good, healthy stimulation and this fuel support to keep the cells and body working.
Right. Thank you so much. Dr. Hardy, we're out of time. So I got to cut you off, but I want to invite everyone, if you want to pick up on this conversation with Dr. Hardy, make sure you look for him at thehardybrain.ca. If you want information about the IteraCare therapy devices or Qigong or any of the other wonderful things that I do around neurology, then come check that out at masteryourlife.ca also. We invite everyone to love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us. Thanks again, Dr. Dave. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leah Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.